All right. Sweet. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight, even though classes were canceled. So props to all of you for being here. So tonight, as you know, we're having our student forum primarily focused on the events from last week. I know how we were feeling about the weather recently, but we'll save that for another time. So during this time, I really want this to be an open conversation, a dialogue. And I want you all as students to ask questions, talk about what happened, if able. We have our amazing counselors in the room, and they're right here. So if at any time you need to step away, they are here for you, okay? So we have 3 different ways you can ask questions. We have our amazing administration here as well to answer any questions. So if you want, we have paper questions that will be read out loud by me. If you're watching live on Facebook, our social media director will be reading those out loud. Or if you want to personally ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll hand you the mic, okay? So I know this is going to be an interesting conversation to have, but here's what I want you all to know. This is not a time that we're going to slander the university. This is not about bashing Central or saying any of that. And I'm not being told to say this either. But I just want you to know that we as students can critique what happened, but this is not a time to bash the university. So I really want to emphasize on that. You as students, your voices are powerful, they're important, and your input is needed. So just know that any solutions that you may have will be documented, and we'll try to have those conversations and look into that because we want to do some solutions and improve things around here so that you all feel safe here on campus. So without further ado, if you have any questions to start off, just go for it. And again, we have counselors in the room whenever you need. So with that, do you have a question?
Thank you. My name is Samantha Verhey. I am a senior here. I have a couple of questions. First off, I have a lot of residents in my hall. I am also RHLC president for North. And a lot of residents in my hall were very concerned about how social media got the all clear before the actual all clear came through. That was a little concerning and caused a lot of what they felt like was miscommunication. So possibly if future events, the all clear could not hit social media until the official all clear comes through, that might be a possibility. The other concern that I know a lot of my residents have felt was that there seems to be a lack of training, especially some gaps, because we know that there's great training offered during the Welcome Week for freshmen, and that's wonderful, but transfer students don't receive that same experience, and there's a gap that needs to be filled there. We also were suggesting that maybe more than once every 4 years at the start of your freshman year, maybe once every year.
Any other questions?
So I'm a senior, and I had a conversation with one of my professors, and she said since we are all adults, she couldn't tell us what to do during the event. And with that being said, she talked about how she had a training, but that training wasn't wasn't given to us. So that's kind of contradicting to me. Like, why would the professors have that training but not be able to tell us what to do? So I was hoping to add on to that maybe we get that as well.
Any other questions, comments?
Thanks. Spencer Brown, Vice President of the Cybersecurity Club. We've also got some other members here. Most of us were in Samuelson when the lockdown was initiated. Lind is basically across the street. I had a couple comments for improvement, I guess, and Andrea, speaking to you personally on the technical side, there are a lot of ways that the campus has to communicate with students during an event that I feel aren't being utilized. We have smart monitors everywhere. Software does exist to show warning messages on every TV, every computer, every information kiosk on campus. I would recommend looking into that. useful text, something more than just, hey, there's been an incident, stay out of the area. So work on promoting flow of information during events, because in Samuelson, everywhere I looked, not a single student knew what to do. No one knew what was going on, rumors were going around, and I'd be willing to speculate that if shots had actually been fired, you would have a lot more injuries from the panic, because if no one knows what's going on, rumors are going to, they're going to flow. I also agree with, I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry. I agreed with the comment on student training. When I was at community college, they gave us ALICE training, alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evade training, basically every quarter. So this university should look into something like that too, because again, if students don't know what to do, they're going to panic. In an emergency, you revert to your lowest level of training. And if we get this training, if we have to watch the same dumb video every quarter, we'll at least know what to do and how to react. You know, do we lock down? Do we get out of the building? How do we let someone know where we are, etc.? The university has some room for improvement. Also, as a direct question, are there going to be any lessons learned reports published about this? Okay.
After these, we've had some sessions with faculty, session now with students. I don't know if Edith is planning more of these in a less inclement weather, and if we can continue doing this until, everybody's had their voice. I know, this is Valentine's night, so there's some people may be, at those events and so forth, but absolutely, we will publish and then staff are scheduled as well. That is not faculty, but the exempt and classified staff. And we, and Jason may want to talk about the process that we are going through of looking at the Twitter feeds, syncing them with the scanner, not the scanner, but with the radio communication, and we know people were picking it up on scanner and then feeding that back into Twitter, and to try and get a better sense of what transpired in that process. Also, candidly, and Jason, you may want to correct this, but this to some extent was almost a text and Twitter created emergency. So we want to get a handle on those first 3 or 4 minutes in which we didn't even know things were happening as a university. I think it was 4 or 5 minutes until we got a 911 call that was called in by someone who got a call or a tweet. I can't recall which one, or a text, I think it was. So we were 4 or 5 minutes late to the game, if you will, to the non-event. And then we're reacting to things, and then it began to spiral. So we have a lot to learn from this one, no question. And training is that's been coming up at every session that we have had, is that I didn't know what to do. And some students have also told me, not in a session like this, but personally, I used, in the absence of what we have taught them or not taught them, they use their K-12 training, which is a different environment because it's, for the most part, one building, and a lockdown has a different word in a K-12 building than it does on a campus with 77 buildings. So we're learning a lot, but yeah, there'll be I guess what we call them, an after-action report. It'll influence our policies and practices, our protocols, and so forth. Jason, do you want to?
I can add a couple of things to that, Spencer. I appreciate you talking about our systems and the technology that we have in place. And just like we talked about in class, there was a lot of misinformation that was happening. But first and foremost, I really appreciate being here. This is a great conversation to have as an institution. And I'm very thankful that we're having this because of a non-event, as you called it, because it wasn't real. But I understand for those 2 hours where this happened, it certainly felt real, right? For myself as well. So I do appreciate that. But we have to do better in those areas, I agree. We have matured our systems over time. If you look at our alert system today compared to it was just a year or 18 months ago, we've grown significantly, but we have to do better still. And the lessons learned will be shared with the institution. Jason has a plan that he's developing because we're still investigating this. But going back to the question you were saying about misinformation, there was so much. The big surprise to me was the amount of information that started coming out on Twitter and Facebook and social media that was simply not accurate. There was a lot of misinformation. There were some spoofed accounts where they were pretending to be coming from official authoritative sources when they were not. And figuring out how we can address that. We can't turn off Twitter, but we can certainly make sure that we communicate more effectively when these things happen. And that's a huge lesson learned for me. And now I'll pass it to Jason. You want to talk more about the system that we have in place? Or whatever else?
So back to your, sorry, I'm not used to a microphone. Back to your point about the video. And if you have to see the same, I think you call it a stupid video every quarter, but that gets you trained. We're looking into that already, into making a, sorry, I went like backbeat, and making a video that's central, right? And it's to us, and to answer these questions that we're learning. And when you talk about lessons learned and after action review, yes, we will be doing that lessons learned after action review. And then we'll be coming up with suggestions. Like Dr. Godino said, it might be some policy changes that come up with the university. But we will be working towards those and trying to do what we absolutely can to make a safe campus. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe in what we do, and every day we make decisions based upon safety of our students. And that's my responsibility, and I take that to heart. And that's my number one goal, is safety of this campus. When we talk about our alert system, our alert system is not an instantaneous system. So the alert system is, we used to have this system 2 years ago. We used to have a system to where if I got an alert call or a call at home, say that we're required by the federal government to send out an alert via the Clery Act, then I would have to drive into the office, get into my computer, and send out the alert. So that span of time was quite a bit. So we have a new system now that actually shrunk that down. And so when this event happened, much like, I can't remember which, the president or Andreas said that we didn't know that it was going on, right? So there's some time gaps in there that during this, I'm standing outside of Bullion Hall not knowing that this is happening until I get the 911 call. And in my 911 call, I make a phone call to my assistant chief and said, send out an alert, we have a report of an active shooter. So at that point in time, he's got to get, we don't carry computers with us, right? And his phone wasn't right next to him. So he's got to get to his cell phone or get to his computer, log into the system, and then send out the alert. Once the alert was sent, 12,500 and something text messages were sent in just over 7 seconds. So once we get to that action, we get that going, it went out pretty quick, right? So it's not this is happening, we hit a button and the alert goes out. That's not how it works. And there is a human input into that. And I think that we responded fairly well. I mean, I believe our department responded pretty good in that situation. We were in the door. 2 officers, myself and Officer Murray, were in the door of Bullion Hall within about 1 minute and 10 seconds of the call. And we're going inside, and we don't hear anything. So we have to stop, because our training is, if we don't hear stimulus, meaning shots fired, people yelling, something happening, then we stop and we do a methodical search of the building, because we don't know what's happening, right? We don't know at this point, Parkland shooting, when a person shot somebody and left with the crowd. We don't know if that happened or not. We don't know what's going on. So we have to make sure that we don't become a casualty as well, but we do it swiftly and as quickly as we can to make sure that we're good. So the initial response into the building itself was very fast. And I got cut off. Did it? Oh, never mind. Sorry. Oh, hold it up. Now I have to hold it up. Sorry, I was holding it down. Now I have to hold it up. So the initial response into it was really fast, and I'm proud of that fact. And really, that just because I was right there with another officer. But there is that human factor when it comes to, sending that alert out and that process of getting it out in that. And so back to your original thing about the education, I agree with you. 100%. And trust me that I'm on it. okay? And then when you're watching the video for the 4th time and you're like, what is this video? You can blame me, okay? But I'm going to do what I can to get that pushed through because I do recognize that, and I want to make that fix.
I want to explain, I mean, you all are saying some things that are absolutely dead on correct. And I want to give you why I believe they're so correct. We have, Jason, the law enforcement officers, do what they call an incident command. So, you know, in front of Lind Hall at the door, Jason's in charge. Not me as the university president, but our chief of police is in charge. And he's, you know, mustering the forces and engineering the response. I go to what's called a emergency operations center to do other sorts of things, and others go as well. So we're removed from Jason by design, because you want to have that the emergency center. I mean, if he goes down, I mean, if it's an attack and he's literally hunkered down, you also want some resources that can do some other things. I had 2 communications people with me. My vice president, Premier Jackson, who's fantastic, and Rich Marino, who is fantastic. We believed before this event that would be more than enough communication. And one of the things we learned was I could have put a 0 behind that and still been overwhelmed by social media. We were, I mean, there's no question we were overwhelmed. I mean, we had 2 things. We had the radios on our desk listening to the chief, and then we had Twitter going on a screen, and then we opened the scanners up, you know, to kind of hear what other people are hearing. And we knew within a minute that we had lost control of that environment. And somewhat arrogantly, I think, I mean, old people, we said, well, we'll just dive into Twitter and we'll straighten it up, right? We'll put the factual stuff up there. And we were getting, as Andreas alluded to, we were lost in our input was just lost. It was just not there. It became so extreme that I had members of our board of trustees on the west side. We were getting ready. I was getting ready to put an all clear notice out, or ask Jason if I could, within probably 15 minutes of the original call, because we had a strong sense that nothing was happening. But then I get a call from a board of trustee members saying how many students have been killed. The helicopters are departing, you know, carrying the wounded and the dead. Well, there were no wounded or no dead, but they were hearing on our scanners our hospital running their protocols, which is to pre-position evacuation helicopters should there be an injury. And that got interpreted as they were coming to airlift people out. So I backed away from suggesting an all clear because clearly I was misinformed. We actually had injured students. And then about 5 or 6 minutes later, another call came in for another active shooter now in the circ. So, you know, these guys respond. So this thing rolled, and I felt very helpless, and we clearly need more people in what we call the EOC to help us do that. Two calm people and, you know, 2 executives not able to handle. We probably need 20 of you in there to help us sort out what's going on. I mean, seriously, because we were over our depth in social media.
I just want to talk real quick to the social media aspect of this. Is it as a first responder, the social media information is coming out. It makes it really difficult for us to respond to events because we're getting false information. You know, we're listening to the radio, we're doing our stuff, and then we get people calling us saying, hey, we heard this or we heard that. And it's not true. So it takes us away for a second to be like, okay, I got to think of this, but that's not true information. So if there's anything that I can ask of all of you is, I don't ever want to have another event, just saying. But if we have an emergency or you're in an emergency somewhere out of Central, if you don't see it firsthand, please don't tweet it. Please don't put it out there unless you see it firsthand, because what you're doing, sometimes, you know, you can put people's lives in danger, right? Posting the wrong information and sending people where emergency responders think we're going here, and all of a sudden a call comes in because of a Twitter that we're now going over here because of the call 911. I never thought in a million years that that the CW Police Department's Twitter feed would be spoofed. And I'm running up here to respond to the circ when there's shots fired inside the circ to take command of the circ, and my phone is just blowing up, and I come inside and I realize there's nothing going on. It's quiet. I'm thinking at that point somebody's messing with us, and I looked at my phone and it's saying CW Police is tweeting this stuff, and I'm like, I'm not tweeting, and I'm the one who has access. So I call Andreas, my boss, and I'm like, hey, shut down our Twitter, pull the plug. I don't know how you do that stuff, computer. Because I really thought that somebody took my password and was doing stuff and at the moment. So a lesson learned for us too is social media, right? And how that plays a role in emergencies and then getting out in front of that. One thing, I appreciate these forums and I appreciate all of your ideas so much because I learn stuff every time I do. And I take your input to heart, and I thank you for giving your input, because one thing I also learned is that you can do a verified Twitter account with a little thing. You laugh, but hey, I get scared every time I hit the send on the Twitter thing because I'm just hoping I'm not messing something up. So I learned things like that, right? And so that's the type of stuff that is fantastic to learn that we can take back and make ourselves better. Right? Our goal is always to be better tomorrow than we are today. That is our goal, 100% of the time. Okay? And so these forums are fantastic. I appreciate you all for coming out, and I'll be quiet now. Sorry. Oh, so I understand. I didn't know until after the fact that the police scanner, I don't know what app it was. There's several apps that went from like 300 people up to over 8,000 people listening to it. The hard part about scanners is this, is that in the law enforcement and first responder world, we all have our own language, right? And our language is not always relative. And this goes back to when we said all clear, right? There's a lot of confusion about all clear and said, you didn't come to our building, you didn't clear us. Well, that's because we're using our language, right? And another lesson learned, right, to not do that. But it's our language of all clear means that the buildings that we had the threats in, the threats are gone. They're clear. That's what we're meaning. And so once I realized, after the fact, once the incident was slowing down and it was done and we're getting our building secure, and we started getting calls about, hey, can I leave my building? Hey, can I do this? Can I do that? Once I realized that, then it really dawned on me because I never thought that I knew people would listen to the scanner. I didn't know it would be that extreme. I mean, a lot of people would listen to the scanner. But then I realized that people were in buildings. So then we did go around and have an officer go and clear every building that happened. But as you listen to police scanners, also keep one thing in mind. You're only getting half the information because we, in a large incident, will split our frequencies up. And one of the frequencies is you're not going to pick up on a scanner. Okay, so we have to have a frequency that we can talk to all of the first responders coming because like State Patrol in our area doesn't have our local frequencies. But we have one frequency that we could talk to all State Patrol. So we go to that frequency so that we can have communication with them. So if you're listening to the police scanner, a lot of times you're only picking up half that information, and sometimes you're not going to understand the language that they're using within it. And that language changes by jurisdiction. I can go to Seattle and listen to the police scanner, and I am confused about what's going on. And I can try to figure it out by putting some pieces together what I think that they're doing, but I'm confused by the language. So the police scanner listening to that sometimes also creates the wanting to get in and put that information out, and sometimes it's not always helpful.
Oh, great. And, whoa, that's really loud. Your student government representatives do have your written statements and questions, so I want to give them a chance to answer some of your questions or to say your questions. So, Maurice, if you want to kick us off.
Real quick, thank you so much for coming up, but if you are kind of towards the back, we do have some seats here. Please feel free to come. I still think it's kind of a safety hazard blocking the door, so don't be shy.
So question regarding that. sorry, back to you. Do you see that spike up to 8,000 and that confusion, like maybe on social media because they don't know the lingo? Do you think that's connected with the lack of communication to students? Like, I didn't get any information between that first and the all clear. So I don't know what you would send, but I needed information. Like, I needed to know what was going on. So
Absolutely, right? And so, like the president was saying, he was getting ready to send a message out of an all clear pretty quickly when we get into the Just Lind Hall, and then you get started crafting that message, and then the circ happens, right? So one of the other lessons learned that we got is that during that time span, it's a long time not to communicate with you, right? To let you know what's going on. So in our lessons learned that we're going to be revising that's happening and policies and procedures for us is that we are going to, we follow the ICS structure inside the command post. And one piece that we did not have at this one is a PIO, Public Information Officer, at our command post. And so in our future plans, that Public Information Officer is going to report to the command post, and then they're going to be bugging me. So every 20 minutes, they're going to say, hey, I need to send something out. What can I say? So that we get that communication going, right? And I say 20 minutes. It might be sooner. It might be later, just depending on the events. Because every event is different. So it's really difficult to create a specific plan for a specific event. So we have very wide plans or wide open plans so that we could fit it and tailor it to every event that happens. But yes, that is part of it. And to make sure that we have the official communication out there. Part of my goal with the video for the education is to instill and show students and faculty and staff where the official communication is going to come from, right? So that's going to be part of it. So we're going to have, here's the official communication. Download this now. Pause 10 seconds, right? So we make sure that we get that information out there to you because absolutely, yes.
And I'll be honest, I was the guy who was supposed to be doing that, and I wasn't. The people that were with me were supposed to be doing that, and we didn't know what to say. We had 2 or 3 drafts, so we wanted to say, we're pretty sure nothing's going on, so don't be so scared, comma, but stay right where you are because we might be wrong. So what we didn't want you to do is misinterpret us and then walk outside because we were reading, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I was reading Twitter too. And I was hearing him say nothing's going on in Lind, but I'm hearing shots fired in the CERC, shots fired in L&L, shots fired in Nicholson. So I didn't want to say it's okay because I was afraid you'd come out. So we've got to, I mean, with the PIO staff, with Khmer and Don and others, we have to get a bag full of messages that are pre-thought out, that are more purposeful, because we didn't have the words, and we didn't want to err on the side. We erred on the side of quote unquote caution, meaning stay where you're. If you've already run away, stay away. If you're hunkered down in a closet someplace with the lights off, stay there. We didn't know what to say, but don't be scared. We didn't know how to say that to you, right? So that's what we wanted to say, but we didn't say it. So we need to learn a lot about how to communicate. We're also I'm thinking about, can we use some semi-secure channels like what's our CWU, we've all got our own login. I'm forgetting what that is for my CWU. Can we start using my CWU in ways that we can actually even communicate with different buildings? A piece of information I wanted desperately but didn't have: where are the classes being held right now? I mean, when we're sitting in that command post, we knew that you were in buildings. We didn't know which building. So I would have loved to be able to say to everybody in Science 1, everybody in Farrell, we have no indication that anything is going on that half of campus. Run to the west and to the north, and where should you go? Wherever you're comfortable, just get away from here. But we didn't know how to do just that, and we didn't want to say to everybody to run because it might have been a bad idea for Samuelson to run because you're one building away. So that we've got a lot to learn about our messaging.
And I'll just add my perception. I was in the EOC with President Guarino and Vice President Khmer Jackson, and we thought that communicating via Twitter was a viable alternative because we, like President Garino said, we'll set this straight. We'll just get on Twitter and use the official account, and this will be very clear to everyone that this is the official communication, but that obviously did not happen. And being at the EOC, a half an hour for me, trying to figure out what's going on, it felt like 30 seconds. Whereas half an hour barricaded in a classroom thinking there's an active shooter on campus.
Experiences are different. Time is going, for
Yep.
the chief, time is going incredibly fast, right? For the EOC, it's going pretty fast. For you all, it's crawling at an incredibly slow pace. And so trying to sync those psychologies up, those emotions up, is a big lesson learned.
And the main takeaway there is that we have to replace misinformation with accurate, factual information through whatever means that we use. I mean, technology plays a big piece into that. Training plays a big piece into that as well. So lesson learned and point taken, and we're going to get better.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. We're trying to get as many questions in as possible, so we do have your written statements, and they're going to be read by your student government officers, and then I'll start tossing the mic around. So I have seen your hands, okay? So go ahead.
After last Wednesday's scare, it seemed as though the president and the university shoved the event under the rug and did not seem to care about the students and staff's mental health. Yes, it was a false alarm, but for the 2 hours, it was very real. Please respect and understand how hard this was.
In clearing buildings, why did police just send students off with nowhere safe to go? This means students were potentially walking on campus with a potential active shooter around. Question based off of the Observer. And why was there no emergency plan for certain buildings like the Science Building, in the Bistro, and etc.?
Why is 9 minutes of response time okay when in school shootings in the past of other schools, response time is shorter? However, that response time isn't fast enough.
Why was the bistro not in full lockdown, and how come students were being evacuated without getting a confirmation that it was okay to go home or if there was a designated spot? And how could that lack of communication affect student safety had this been a real threat?
What proactive steps are being taken to ensure students are mentally prepared to respond? And could the university focus more on sending emergency messages through a situation like this instead of posting most updates on social media?
I felt like it was very inconsiderate of CW police to provide, no, not police, it just says CW, sorry, to provide counseling in a space where many students did not feel comfortable. Also, don't like that there were basically thrown out of the circ, left by ourselves. And how come my emergency contact did not get notified about the events?
There was a serious misinformation issue, as we're aware. I feel a lot of this came from the lack of information the students had. The message sent out was unclear and few people knew what was happening. Additionally, there were many discrepancies in the timeline sent out and when most people had information, such as when alerts were sent out. Why was this?
I'll start this conversation and other people will finish it. Those were a lot of questions.
And listen, if we don't answer your question, it's because it slipped our mind, so throw it back at us.
Yep. I think since you asked the last question, that's fresh in my mind, and why was there inconsistencies in the information, and that's accurate. Meaning, when after this was the all clear was sent out, and we started to kind of wanted to communicate the timeline and the things that happened, the information that went out first was the best information that we had. There's an expression in the for those of you who might be familiar with the service, it's called the fog of war, meaning that there's this confusion sometimes as to what really transpired, but we wanted to communicate out as quickly as we could the timeline as we saw it at that time. And then as Jason and his team continued the investigation, it became clear to us that there were some discrepancies in there, and we corrected those, and then we recommunicated those. So I think it's unfortunate, but I also think that it was with best of intentions. Right? We have to do better in those communications, absolutely, but the intent was to get the information out as quickly as we could, as accurately as we could. And then over time that changed, and we re-communicated as well. And the other question that stuck out in my mind was the 9 minutes. So whether or not 9 minutes is a sufficient amount of time is one part of that conversation. The other part of the conversation is 9 minutes is what our system is currently capable of doing. Meaning that there's a human factor that plays into this. Jason was talking about how his staff members, they have to open up their laptop, they have to log into the system, and they have to access the system, and there's a lot of authentication that happens when that takes place. And the person sitting in front of the computer is a human being. There are stressors and there's emotion, and it takes a little bit of time to get into that. As we look at evaluating this, I agree that if we look at other unfortunate events like this, they usually don't last very long, right? And 9 minutes, I would argue, is perhaps, most of them have been over by that time. But there's also, as we look at how we can use technology and other approaches to solve these problems, we need to bring that number down, absolutely. But again, there are human beings involved, and some of these things do take time.
First off, and for all the observer folks and student media folks, I was once we have a great student newspaper, so do not think I am criticizing what I'm about to say. We don't believe that 9 minutes is acceptable. We think it's the best we can do right now. Not acceptable. It's just we've got to find a way of doing better. It's just that's what our technology that we have employed and our protocols and how we're deploying it resulted in. So not acceptable. Please do not think that I'm saying, good job, we're not going to work on that issue. That's not what, if I didn't read the full article, so if I'm the quote of the acceptable, my bad. But that's not true. The other thing I actually want to make two other points. When we compare ourselves to other response times, we are oftentimes now comparing ourselves to an active shooter in a high school or an elementary school, and that is an actual shooter. And those response times, those situations are usually cleared in a matter of minutes. That is, shooter down. We didn't have a shooter, so we're measuring ourselves in the message that is being transmitted. If we would have looked at our actual physical response time, it was about 1 minute, 20 seconds, maybe, not even. It was as long as it took that guy to run and on a dead sprint from Bullion to Lind. That was our response time. And then had there been a shooter in there, we don't know at all. Now a whole other scenario unfolds, but that probably would have been a resolved situation shorter, in less time than it took us to get our 9-minute message out. The other thing about measuring a K-12, us against a K-12 environment is, you've all been to those environments. They, for the most part, have a speaker in every classroom. And in the principal's office, the microphone where they can do announcements. We don't have that at Central. I've actually talked to Andreas. Could we have a single microphone someplace, and in every classroom and in every dorm room, we could broadcast into there. We're not wired that way. We're not set up that way, so we have to use other technology. So the response, the comparison of the response is not always the proper comparison. The last thing I will say is, we were very sensitive to the emotional trauma that you all felt. Now, so you might say, well, why didn't we cancel school? Well, the reason we didn't cancel school is, again, unlike a K-12 environment where you're for the most part, all of the students live, with a few miles around there. We have international students on campus. We have students from other states on campus. They can't always, if you will, quote unquote, go home and seek their support there. All of our training, all of my experience is that it's better to be, rather than to be left alone, to come back to your community, to your faculty, to your staff, and to each other, and to talk with each other, hold each other, to cry with each other. I mean, whatever your emotional response suggests is right for you, it's better to do that. That's why I didn't cancel classes. I wanted you back on the campus so that, because I thought that was the best place to help you get over, and it's going to take a while to get over. You're also going to have, for those who went through that trauma, you're going to have, it's going to be a cycle. It's going to be like a sine wave. But it's going to dampen. But you're going to have flashbacks down the road. A year from now, you're going to feel that trauma again. And this is not a quick one-day get over it. I mean, both he and I and Jason have had, you know, those kinds of experiences either in law enforcement or in the military. And this is a mild PTSD sort of thing. And so you would never tell a soldier who has gone through something traumatic, just go off by yourself. You want them back in an environment that is as close to normal with others who have shared the experience. And that was the basis for the decision. It was not based on callousness. Now, if you believe that was the wrong decision, absolutely believe that, and I take the criticism, but it was a decision based on what we thought was the best way to help you deal.
There was a question about, I was in the circ, and once the police cleared the circ, they basically kicked me out the door and said, see you later. So in our training, when we go through police training, we are clearing buildings, and we're dealing with an active shooter situation to where our training is saying, go, 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 right? Get out, go. And so as we look at this and do an after action within our own agencies, and by the way, we've already started that. I've already done a debrief with the Ellensburg Police Department, the Kittitas County Sheriff's Department, and us about how we can improve things. And one of them was this very concept that came up. And it was, how can we improve this? Well, there are times that we can adjust, and if we come to that room and you're in there, and we know that there's no shooters inside that room or nothing's going on, we can simply say, stay here, lock the door, and leave you inside. Okay, so we're adjusting plans to that. And then there was talks about having counselors into the circ. You know, I didn't know that the counselors were happening. It was a fantastic response. I appreciate all of the counselors we have on our campus here. Me going through the scene, that didn't cross my mind as far as it being in the circ, but I could absolutely understand that. I get that feeling. So as our plans go forward, again, we talk about lessons learned and we talk about making ourselves better. Part of our plan for active shooter responses is going to be, if we have large groups of people in classrooms, we're going to identify large buildings that we could send them to. So that night, I could have changed, if hindsight is 20/20, right? If I could change that, I would go back and say, tell them, everybody, you get out of a building to go to Nicholson Pavilion. Get out of the way, right? And go to Nicholson to where we could have counselors waiting for you. We could have people to talk to you in a safe space where it was. So we're going to be working through those as well as far as our response, because we, you know, in our plans, we didn't plan for a lockdown, right? We didn't believe that our training is run, hide, fight. But I realized through this that the lack of training that happens, and I fully understand that. And, you know, every incoming freshman is lucky enough to spend 2 hours with me in Wildcat Welcome Weekend. But talking about this, but in all seriousness, you know, that's a busy weekend, and we're talking about a very important subject. So we've already had conversations about making a video and doing that sort of stuff, the education. And in our back plans with that is going to be having you go to a safe space and give you directions on where to go and have those counselors available for you. So I do recognize that. And there's another gentleman, a student next to me earlier, whispered in my ear and said, are you going to share this information with other universities? Yes. We're already planning. So we will have a summit in the spring in April. I host a chiefs meeting in our office in April, and all the chiefs in the universities come over and we meet and we talk about things. This is going to be the big topic of it. And really it's not it's a lessons learned to say, if you're not thinking about this, you need to think about this, because this is what happened, right? And this is as real as it gets with no injuries, right? So we learn a lot of lessons, and we are taking those notes, and we're going to make that, again, you know, I keep saying that we're going to be better tomorrow than we are today, but I truly believe that. and that's what I go by. So that.
Talking to the other university presidents about our experiences, and say learn from these things, start thinking about these things right now. We'll get a report later. Kamir Jackson, I know, has talked to the other public information officers at the other universities. Over time, I do believe this will become a case study that will be used nationally in training, because it's unique, fortunately, in the sense that there wasn't actually a shooter, but it's if not unique, it's kind of particular. It's unusual in the length of time, 2 hours of rolling 911s. That normally doesn't happen. And I'll give you a little secret of one of the things that scared me the most when I was in the EOC is I have a pretty good visual map of our campus. Started in Lynn, first call. Second call was the third call was L&L. Fourth call is Nicholson. That's a straight line, people. So I'm thinking that either, in the best of situations, there's somebody in a parked car with binoculars watching him run up and down Walnut, laughing like crazy, thinking this is the greatest spoof, or someone is spreading our resources out and are going to attack someplace else. Another reason why we didn't identify a safe house, because if that second theory was correct, I could be sending you to the bad place, and these are all the safest places, because that's I watch too many police movies, I guess, right? But that's what the bad guys do. They get the cops going that way, and then they do something bad over here. And that's what I was thinking might be happening to us on the campus. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I know it might be a drastic thought, but do you think that since it was in that straight line, do you think someone would be planning something? I know that's our little fear of coming back thinking
like watching our response and yeah. Yeah. If they were, if I were that devious a mind, right, and I wanted to see how he was going to react, I wouldn't pick this place to attack, because that response, I'll take some hits on how we did on the EEC and communication. No question, we have a lot to learn there. His response was, if not perfect, as close to perfect as a human being can make it. So if I were that person, I'd say, next university, please, because they've got it down. And it wasn't just Jason. We had everything from the FBI to Fish and Wildlife responded to here. So it was awesome. So I think that part of it worked really well. What we're really talking about is now the healing, the communication, and kind of the post-trauma, and how do we deal with it, and what are the lessons learned, and how do we implement them. So I honestly don't. Yeah. I don't.
And we're going to keep moving on with questions. I know a lot of you have questions, so we're going to jump right over here.
So jumping all the way back, sorry, I've been holding my question for a minute, but prior to the ASCWU board talking about the concerns from Facebook and everything, President Gaudino said something along the lines of, we weren't in that state of something to worry about. And then we also, and like the biggest common theme is the issue with social media. So you said that there were spoofs of the police account, but Central Washington University, that Twitter literally started a hashtag that said #ASCWU active shooter. So obviously people started to jump to conclusions and different things like that. So in future events, if this was something we didn't need to worry about, why is a Twitter account directly associated with the school, not even ran by students? Correct me if I'm wrong, but why did we start that hashtag if there was nothing to really be worried about?
I don't know that we did. Don? Yeah.
I'm Dawn Alfred. I work in public affairs, and the reason that I did that is I have gone to FEMA training, emergency management training back in D.C., and that is how we were trained to actually communicate with our publics. For one, that you guys would know that's where the official information comes from Central Washington U, and then to put a hashtag so all of our information would be centered, because there's so much out there. So we wanted one, and that was what the initial communication that came out. And so that's why we put 2019 too, so you wouldn't look at it in the future, So it was just to kind of gear all the information in one place. It wasn't to scare you, again, but there was so much information was for you to be able to look at for Central.
Miscommunicated with you. For the first 2 hours, there was something to worry about. I mean, we didn't know what was going on. We thought there might be an active shooter that's running around on the campus. So what I wanted to say was, several times, if you're in Farrell, if you're in Science 2, if you're in Shaw Smizer, run, leave the campus. Don't, and that's why I didn't know how to communicate it, because I don't want to say don't worry. Yeah, there's still something that might be going on campus, but I think you're actually better off if you leave campus over there, because all the activity is over here. That's the run, hide, fight. So I wanted some of you to run, but I didn't know how to tell some of you to run without some people running that were potentially in the line of action. That's what I mean by the not worried. Don't barricade yourself in Farrell. I'm just making that one up. The farthest building from Lynn, or in Psych, and I know there were students in Psych that were barricaded in as well. Those are places where you probably should have been heading to your apartments or something, and not hanging around campus. But that kind of differential response, our system that I had, which was everybody gets it, I didn't feel I knew how to say that in whatever we have 120 characters. So that's.
Thank you. We're moving on to the next question. I'll come around.
Hi. So I have actually had the misfortune of going through this not once but twice. The first time was actually at ASCWU Des Moines. And I was just out of curiosity wondering, do you communicate with the other heads of those satellite universities? And the reason I want to know that is because when it happened at Highline, it'll be a year ago in 2 days, there were intercoms in every building, and even though we did lack that training that faculty and the security may have gotten, there were comm directions being played to everybody. And about the mental health thing, Central Des Moines did end up canceling school the next day because of how toxic that place was for that time being. So I was just wondering, is there a way that maybe y'all could communicate more with one another as different satellite campuses? Because if they're a smaller school with lesser resources, why was their response time in terms of telling us what to do so much faster, so much more streamlined? We did end up with the same, SWAT, FBI and things, and that part was very scary, and so I can, relate. But if we're the bigger school with more money, more resources, why is it that we can't implement those things first and then make it standard throughout the rest of our schools? Like, why are they pioneering it and we're not?
We're the bigger school, but not the school with more money per student. So not necessarily true there. And also, some of it's the age of our buildings, right? You've got Barge Hall, which is 120 some years old, and you've got Samuelson, which is brand new. But I don't know of a university, honestly, and this is not a compliment, I just don't know of a university, Catherine might, that has a intercom in every room.
And I would just add, with regard to the centers, keep in mind that we operate our centers on community college campuses. So the system in place at Des Moines or Linwood or Pierce follows the guidelines within the specific community college. And the other thing to think about there is, as the president was describing, they're smaller institutions, significantly smaller than Central. And in many ways, as he was describing the situation in the K-12 sector, in terms of a smaller footprint for operations, that is a more similar comparison to what happens on those smaller campuses. But what we can learn from those campuses are things that are already discussed here. Yes, we would like to have a clearer intercom system across campus to get that message out. One of the things we haven't discussed much, which is being discussed among all of the colleges, most of our buildings on campus, as you know, the majority are academic buildings or have some sort of academic function. One of the things that we will have in place very soon is a careful building monitoring system. So there'll be building monitors, floor monitors in every building. with backups assigned, so that in terms of on-the-ground communication as well, there's people in the buildings who understand the operations for that building in the case of an emergency, and those people will be trained. And I'm sure, I'm looking down at Jason, we'll be going through drills on campus to make sure that we understand what that process looks like. We can't anticipate every situation, but we can do a better job preparing the campus as a whole for that operation.
You know, for those of you who are going to multiple buildings on campus, you also know that some of our buildings are keyed. I mean, you literally stick a brass key and turn the key, and there's no digital lockdown capability there. A lot of our rooms, classrooms, are the same situation. Our newer buildings are digital; they're swipe cards. So we have been asking for a long time, kind of a little bit to your point, we've been asking the state for a long time for security money, if you will, to rewire every door in the campus and to be able to lock down a building. Right now, you have to run to the front of the door and in some cases know how to lock the door and have a key to lock the door. So we have a long way to go in terms of, if you will, securing a building relatively rapidly. It's right now we do not have that capability.
I'm just going to turn around just because my back hurts. So to your point with talking to other administrators at the other centers, it just so happens we had already set up, myself and my assistant chief are going to be going around to every center to talk to the centers about their emergency protocols. And really what we were trying to do there is to try to learn. And we're trying to gain information of how we can help them and how they can help us. And so we had already had those meetings set up previous to this, to last Wednesday. So we'll be through like the next week. We're going to be on the road, touching base with those during and learning from them and talking to them and making sure that our CW students at those centers are also receiving what they should in the sense of security and safety.
Thank you. And Maurice will begin to read a student statement.
If CWU wasn't sure about the severity of the threat, then why was Lind Hall evacuated at 5:15 p.m. when the official alert was not sent till 5:35 p.m.?
So there was some comments made by a person off campus, and those comments were what you would deem threatening in nature. Okay. The general time frame was about the threats call came in at about, I want to say it's about 4:15 or so in the afternoon, and it was a city case. So one of your officers, CW officers, happened to see that on the screen of our computers and said, I'm interested in what's going on in that threats case. Pokes onto the screen and sees that there was a threat, and whether it was a flip it threat, whatever it is, we don't know at that point in time. There was a threat that was made that mentioned shooting and mentioned CWU, right? So the hard part we have to realize is that, a lot of times, especially nowadays, people say a lot of things that they don't mean, right? I'm going to go do this to this person, or I'm going to go do this to this person, whatever. So as the police are trying to investigate really what's going on, what the tone, what's happening, how did that come about, our officers are trying to find some good contact information to get a hold of this person. And we're going through trying to get a hold of the information of the student. And at that point, at some point in there, I get a phone call, and I can't remember exactly what time it was, at home. It says, hey, are you aware of this threats call that's happening? I said, I'm not. I look at my phone, I read it. My lieutenant, who was at the office who called me, was going up to teach the women's self-defense course up in Nicholson. And I didn't have anybody else at the office supervisory level at that time. So I said, I'll come into the office and I'll see if I can help you all get the address and phone number of this person so that the city police department can go and talk to them. Because at that time it was concerns, but it wasn't to the level of, we can't send out an alert for every time somebody makes a comment that they're going to do something. We have to get the validity of it and what happened. So they're investigating that. I come into the office. When I get into the office, the message to me was, this thing keeps changing. The message to me was, hey, we have what we believe. It could be a credible threat. They're still looking into it. Okay, great. What do you need? What help do you need? We need the address and phone number. Great. I call the dean of students office. I need the address, the phone number. I need to know if this person has night classes. And so we're trying to do background information on what's going on. In the meantime, once I hear that it's a credible comment or credible threatening comment that was made, I made the decision, because I found out at that point in time that it was directed towards the dean of students office. So I made the decision. I called him. I said, hey, I need you to lock down your suite. Okay, we have some comments that were made that are concerning to us. I want you to lock down your suite, and I'm going to send some officers up to you, and they'll explain what's going on. In my mind, I'm taking a precautionary step, right? In my office, I get the thing that says credible threat. I think that anybody in here would want me to come to your office or your classroom and wherever and lock you down as a precautionary to say, hey, we have something, we're trying to investigate it. I don't know at this point in time. This is what we're doing. So in the meantime, officers are going up there, not lights and sirens. Officers get up to there. We park an officer. I believe it's on one side of each side of the building. A car is there. And really the thinking of that is that if somebody who's coming to the office to do something, they're going to see the cop cars out in front of the buildings. And at that point in time, they're going to, give us some time to help and figure this stuff out. I don't have the timeline in front of me. It's somewhere around 450-ish, 447, 450, something like that they were outside there. Yeah. So at that point in time, we don't have anything verified. We're just trying to do a precautionary thing to help our students, our faculty, our staff that were in those offices. So at that point, I show up because I felt the responsibility that if I call them and ask them to close their doors and lock it, and then we'll talk to you about it later, I felt the responsibility that I need to be the one to show up and say, this is what we got, right? This is what's happening. So as we're talking about this, we're talking about this inside the dean of students office. I'm sitting with the dean, I'm sitting with two other employees inside of the office, and we're discussing this, saying, EPD is now, they're talking to the person that actually heard the comments, because the person who called us in was not the one who actually spoke to the person. It was somebody who works with them, and they called. So we're talking about the comments, we're talking about what they're doing at this point. They're trying to find the address, they're trying to get the information, they're trying to go through their stuff, and everybody's out of the office. So I walk outside the office with the dean and with our other officer, Murray Wells, and I'm walking out to my car. I'm going out, in my mind, I'm going out to call Ellensburg Police Department to say, hey, what's the update on this? What do you have? Because then I can notify the dean's office to tell them, hey, we don't have anything, or at this time, do we have to elevate to something? We're in an investigative stage at this point. So as we're out there talking, that's when the call comes over the radio, which is the KitCom dispatch call to us, which is KitCom is our 911 service in our valley. So our KitCom dispatches an active shooter in Lind Hall. Okay, I don't question when KitCom dispatches me to a call. Right? I'm going. I don't sit back and think, could this be fake? Could this not be fake? I don't know. At that point in time, I knew nothing other than we had a call at Lind Hall, and that's where we went. And so we go into Lind Hall, myself and the other officer first in, and within a minute, we're inside the doors. And so that's how, does that answer? Oh, yes. Yes, sorry. So there was, as we're going, I'm standing outside thinking it's a normal day. There's students walking out of Lind Hall. So I didn't know, right? So as they're coming out, we get the call, we go in, I yell at some of the students to go to Samuelson and to get into Samuelson to get out of the way, because I really thought at that point in time we had an incident going on inside of Lind Hall. So I wanted them to get out of there. And so then as I'm running in, we go into the door, we literally get inside the door, and there's nothing. There's an employee walking out. We asked the employee, did you hear anything? No. Well, what am I to assume? Nothing's going on? Or do I have to treat it as real? In my mind, I have to treat it as real. And I think that's what everybody would want me to do. And so at that point in time, we're like, okay, we got to slow up here. We get a couple more units, and we're going. Because we don't hear any shots. We don't hear any what we call stimulus going on. So in that case, when that's happening, we're going. We're in there. We're stopped. Boom. Officers show up. I step outside, and I take command of the scene. And I start to direct the resources that are coming in. that's happening. I start to direct the Ellensburg's officers. I start to stage our fire department. I go into my mode of tactical mode of setting things up. Because I'm thinking that somebody may have shot somebody and just walked out. I don't know, because everything is gone. Everybody's gone. So when we talk about that ROTC knew before the police, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm standing next door. I had no idea. No clue that all that stuff was going on. None. It happened. Yeah, so to the link to get to that, there was a conversation inside, we believe there was an overheard conversation maybe inside the dean's suite somewhere or inside of Bullion, that a conversation indicated the words active shooter. I never used the words active shooter. I used the words, I've got some concerned comments that were made. Okay? Those words got overheard. Those words were told to another person in passing, and that person called their boss and said, hey, this is what I heard in passing. Their boss looks outside and sees cop cars out inside of Bullion, but our cop cars were there as a precaution for the office that was up there. So they had that, and they had another phone call from an employee that was kind of an odd phone call. So they're thinking, okay, I have 3 points of information, right? I have this phone call of this person who works up there. I have this person that's telling me that this happened, and I see cop cars outside. Something must be happening. So they enact their protocol, which is their protocol. They have to do it. They got the 3 points of information. They believe that's happening. They set off their protocol, and the protocol happens to send out the text messages and the text messages to each other inside of their group. And then what happens is a student hears that information or gets that information inside of Farrell Hall and sees it on another student's phone or something, calls our 911 dispatch. Our 911 dispatch says, what are you reporting? And the person goes, I'm confirming there's an active shooter on Central's campus. And Kickom says, are you reporting one? And they said, no, but Lind Hall is being evacuated. And so the dispatcher says, are you reporting an active shooter? And there's a space and time there of the talking. And then he says, yes, Lind Hall is evacuating. So dispatch is taking his information, right, as truth that's going on. They're doing their job, and they dispatch us to the active shooter. Okay, so dispatches us to that. And then off we go. And then, sorry, Edith.
No, you're good. You're
I was
good.
just
We're just trying to get as many questions as
sorry.
possible.
Sorry.
But no, you're good. You're good. You're good. I don't mean to cut you off. So we're going to kind of let a couple
Does that
students
help?
say some statements and questions, and then
Does that
we'll
help
give
that?
it back to you all to answer them. Okay? Just to get as many student voices as possible.
Thank you. God, I hate hearing my voice on mic. I'm Charles Whitmire. I'm representing the RHLC from Wendell B. And I really just wanted to say that my experience during this whole thing was I had the fortune of being with other members of RHA, other leaders that had a pretty decent idea of what to do during an event like this, or during the event that happened last week. But I know of people that simply didn't really know what to do during times like this. I heard that people in Science 2 or Feral or something were going up and down the halls, like flushing toilets, screaming and yelling, being all ah, and just all being crazy. And I really wanted to know what kind of training we can offer to help create people that can lead in situations like this. Because if an event like this, if there was an actual active shooter, and it was during a non-classroom time when we didn't have trained staff or faculty on hand to look up to, we would just need someone to look up to, someone to lead the situation, a group of people in the event that they have to hide or run. When I saw back from my K-12, I remember that video of the run, hide, fight situation, or protocol. And one thing I noticed that it didn't cover a lot on hiding. It didn't cover on what to do when you're hiding. And I came up with this theory. Like, I've seen it. When people don't have a task to do in a stressful situation, they feel helpless. And helplessness breeds panic, and panic breeds fear. And fear is not a good thing to have in situations like that. So I'm wondering, what can the community do to help provide people with this mental strength and willpower to deal with situations like this, to create leaders?
Moving on with questions, too.
Hi, my name is Connor. I'm a non-traditional freshman. I actually have some experience in the private security sector. This was my second active shooter scenario, and the first one of which that was a false alarm. I can't understate just how blessed we really are at the fact that we're able to have this conversation right now with no casualties whatsoever. But I can tell you that in the live scenario, you can't predict how you're going to react, but I can tell you that survival, professionally speaking, survival comes down to two things: training and constant state of preparation. My question for the faculty here is, as students and as faculty, how do we go about creating a program, whether that's in the form of a club, group, seminars, what have you, to educate and prepare students and faculty for an emergency situation? Because I know Texas Tech has their Avoid, Deny, Defend program that they teach in the corporate sector. I know that the Department of Homeland Security offers a lot of training as well, and they're very active about it. And I know that there's a bunch of other resources that we have available, but my question is, what can we do as a conjoined effort to increase our training and increase our preparation?
Hi, my name is Shelby Hamblin. I'm an anthropology student here and chair of the Services and Activities Fee Committee, which is where I was when the alert went out last Wednesday. I have a couple of things to say. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. First of all, I just wanted to say everybody experiences things differently. And for some, this was not a mild event, and it's not resulting in mild feelings. This was real, and this resulted in feelings of what if, and I just feel like that's not being recognized, and as a student, I need you guys to recognize that. And I'll end it with a question. As we were being escorted out of the circ last Wednesday, we were escorted out these doors, but students who were residence hall residents who were not in their hall were being told to go to Samuelson. Why were they being told to go to Samuelson when that would have required them to go around the building and right into the area of action or impact or whatever term you would like to use? Thank you.
I just had a quick statement. I just wanted to say that I wish that there was some leniency with attendance as far as keeping the university open. I know that following the events, like she said, it was like a real thing. Everybody has separate experiences. We have 2 individuals that have already came forward saying that this is their second time being involved in something like this. It does trigger real and raw emotions, and I just feel like that's not being recognized. If the university is open, we're required to be there. Each professor has their own way of conducting the classroom. Some people take attendance, some people don't. So basically, I was penalized in attendance for taking a mental health day, and I just don't deem that as appropriate, especially after something as traumatic as that event. I think that if we were to keep the university open just to keep normalcy, I understand your intentions with that, but I also don't understand why it's okay to, kind of penalize me for not joining in and having my own reaction and kind of being forced into a place where it was really scary for me that day. I didn't want to be here. I'm going to be honest. I didn't feel safe here. There was with Twitter and with everything that had gone on, it was confusing for students. We had misinformation. Reports from CWU we weren't given thorough explanations until 36 hours after. So it didn't make it a place that I felt like I wanted to be. I needed to stay home and process what had just happened in the comfort and security of my own home, and I was penalized for it in class. And so I just wish that like leniency would have happened, or maybe expressed to professors.
Because what you're saying is absolutely correct, and it's addressable though in terms of the penalty.
So faculty were asked, I sent a message to all faculty that asked for them to recognize the stress that the campus was under, since faculty were under a lot of stress, as were students and staff, and to think about that as they were designing any sort of assignments, alternative assignments, or thinking about strategies to support students. If your experience has been otherwise, there are steps you can take, and I encourage you to do so. If you feel like your grade has been impacted unfairly by the situation, you have, not only do you have an appeal process, but you do have the opportunity to speak with chairs and deans, and I have made that very public so that if students feel that they have been treated unfairly, I urge you to talk to the chair of the department or the dean, or you can reach out directly to me. If you don't know who I am, I'm the provost, so you can follow that chain, and we will deal with each case individually. So you do have steps that you can take, and faculty were asked to think about the situations, both in terms of that event and the challenges with the weather that directly followed for students with attendance questions.
The same goes for weather. I have a loud voice, so I won't. The same goes for weather. No, we're not talking about the weather. I don't want to talk about the weather. Trust me, I've been talking about the weather. But the same goes. We've also told faculty to be sensitive to students' their living conditions, the quality of their tires, their general comfort level, and so forth, and to not penalize students for lack of attendance, and to find alternatives. If that is not happening, this goes for everybody and your friends. You do have the channels that Provost Frank said, and they kind of culminate in filing a formal grade challenge or grievance challenge, and that typically gets well, not typically. That's I don't know who does that. That's handled over here within the student affairs activity. So you're not going to be battling your professor, in his or her office about the challenge. That's happening with a council that is populated by both faculty, staff, and I think the majority are students.
I would just urge you to say something. So if you do feel that you have been, that something is challenging in your class situation, please say something, and we will deal with each case on an individual basis.
Don't sit and be penalized on top of the other challenges.
And more questions and statements?
So someone did already mention this, but I think it's really important. This is my main concern, that this whole event was somebody probing to see how the school and how emergency response would react. I know that when this was brought up previously, the statement given was that the way that we reacted would deter someone from wanting to attack here. However, I think that the response to that should have been, we are having extra security measures, or we are looking into the possibility of that, because that is my main concern, and that is why I came to class on Thursday, honestly feeling pretty scared to be there.
So can I talk to that real quick, please? So all evidence, that is not the case. Okay, that is not the case of that somebody was doing a test run to us. We've been investigating. It's going to be we'll be about 2 more weeks until we'll have our finalized investigation, because we are tracking down Twitter. We are tracking down all of these other things that are happening. So I will tell you, as the chief of police, that was not the case, and that is not the current, that we don't have that current threat. Okay, that is not the case. So I hope that didn't happen, right? That didn't happen in that sense.
For anybody who is still feeling that way, and let me tell you, I'll give even more detail than Jason, because he's a more thoughtful person than I am, I guess, in this regard. We left that night thankful, relieved. By the way, none of us slept too. Trust me, if you're the president of a university, your greatest single fear is that a student's going to get hurt and, you know, and God forbid, killed. And I'm sitting over there helplessly thinking that you are being killed. So Catherine didn't sleep. I mean, we're still not. I wake up, you know, take a look at my eyes. But to your point, we thought we would come to work the next morning at 8 o'clock and immediately start an FBI-based investigation to determine what was going on. And that is the and we did have FBI on our campus to start that. And very, very quickly, it was very clear that this really started in a misconstrued, overheard conversation, and then cascaded. I mean, we don't want to blame anybody. This is all. There's nobody that we can identify that had any bad intentions, that did anything malicious, or even thinking it was a bad joke. Everybody acted properly from what they thought they had heard, and we think we know the people who heard it. You know, then I said it to you, and then you texted it to your friend, and that friend texted it to or called in Farrell, and we know the person who made the call to 911. We know their name. We've talked to them. We've got the recordings at the 911 office. Gosh, what all do we have? We know the parent who called in the threat to this building, not from this area, from, you know, a student called and said, this is happening, and so, you know, I think it was dad called 911. I would do the same thing if my son called me and said, I'm in a lockdown in the student union. I'd call 911 to make sure things were happening, and so we pretty much can account for the individual who made every single call, and they're the parent of a student who heard from this Twitter. So we have, not only do we not have evidence that it was a testing or a threat or a probe, we actually have pretty good knowledge now of exactly what transpired from the very first communication that happened essentially between people in Bullion and people in Lind. So don't know. We would still have other agencies on this campus, because we know he's 13, 14 officers, right, running 3 shifts. So there's a limited amount of staffing we have. We'd have other officers augmenting him if we thought there was a 1%, a 0.5% chance that we were wrong in that accounting.
So after the event, if you noticed, there was Ellensburg police cars driving the malls. There was sheriff's office. There was Fish and Wildlife, and that was really our effort to try to show you all that we're here, right? To be very, very visible. And so there was those other agencies on our campus that night taking extra security precautions, not the sense that there was a threat, but the sense to make people feel comfortable. We were trying to do that.
This is just a reminder, we do have counselors here and ready for you if you desire. Okay, they're over there right in the corner by the rec center, and they're amazing. Just saying, if you ever need to step away. Moving on with questions from the students.
So I'm going to kind of explain my experience first and follow up with a question. So when this whole event happened, I was over at Black Hall with my class, and what we did was we immediately barricaded ourselves, turned off the lights, and we were just waiting for police to escort us out. And at some point, we actually moved to a supply hallway that was right behind our classroom, and we waited there for over an hour. And everyone in my class was terrified. I even had some people who were in my class thought they were going to die that night. And finally, our professor called 911 because she wanted to get us out of there because people were so scared. And the person over 911 told us to just exit out of the building. And we wanted to get a police escort out because we were scared, and as far as we knew, there was still an active shooter somewhere because all of our phones were on silent or were off. And so finally, she just said, oh, you can just exit out. You guys are fine. And so we exited out of the building the entire time just thinking that an active shooter could have been around the corner, not knowing what's going on. And so yesterday we had Jason actually come by the classroom and kind of explain to us what happened, that the 911 dispatcher never told the police kind of hey, there's a class who wants to be escorted out. I kind of just want to ask, why was there that lack of communication that happened there when there were probably other students on campus who also called 911 and could have possibly been told the same thing, even though they could have wanted a police escort out of the building?
So it's really, this is one of those, it goes back to lessons learned when I talked about earlier, and I talked about in the classroom with you all yesterday, is that I never anticipated that we were going to lock down and then have to escort people out, right? But it makes total sense now, right? Because after going through this as lessons learned, I absolutely understand how you could be in that situation and we send it all clear and you still don't feel comfortable. And in my mind going through there, I'm like, I got to get these buildings clear. I got to get, I'm running the scene at this point. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, we sent the all clear. It's going, right? So it's clear. And I had multiple questions from our dispatch saying, people in Hebler Hall want to know if they can clear. Yes. People in such and such hall want to know if they can clear. Yes. And so at that point in time, I really started to realize that this was happening. And so, like we talked about, I didn't, the actual escorting out, lesson learned, right? It's a lesson learned. And I told, and like I talked to you about in the class, you know, our plan next time will be adjusted based upon everything that we did here. And I apologize to you in your class that we weren't there to do that. Okay? We'll fix it.
Thank you, Jason. And going on to more questions.
First off, I just want to say thank you to the ASCWU police. I'm also thankful that this was fake because everyone here is family, and I'm happy that everyone's safe. And I appreciate you guys for your service. You guys' response was amazing. Going on to the ASCWU administration, my question would be, how are you guys going to make sure that you guys are going to prevent, I guess, the false information from spreading? Again, God forbid, if this was to happen and there was an actual active shooter, if students saw a text or a message and we didn't believe it and people were just roaming around, you know, there's that potential danger. And seeing how this has happened, how would you guys prevent it from the false information from happening again so that you guys are still credible to the students?
Before you answer that question real quick.
All right, first of all, I'd like to thank you guys all for listening to us tonight. I'm really thankful for it. I do have one question that I would like to hopefully get answered. So I was wondering if you could please give us, I know this has been touched on somewhat, but I still need a breakdown because I'm still confused personally. If we could get a minute-by-minute breakdown of from when KitCom was notified at 5:25 and the notification went out at 5:35, could we get a minute-by-minute breakdown of everything that you did between those 10 minutes? The answer is yes, and we have it. I think, didn't we send it out? It's online. It's online. And we'll get it, I mean, I think she has a copy she can hand you. But it's online. We'll get the URL for you. And it could change 1 minute within the next 2 weeks when we re-listen to a tape and, you know, synchronize our watches and that sort of stuff. But it's as accurate as the information we have had in what is now a week later. So we're pretty confident of that timeline. So if you want to just grab that one, you can have that one. And then we'll resend out, we'll repost, or I'll ask Edith to repost on where that's out on the website.
And going back to the first question in regards to, you know, what we can do to make this better. And so Jason is the chief of police. I'm the vice president of operations. So Jason reports to me. And you have my full commitment in we're going to take our lessons learned. We're going to get feedback from the students. We're getting feedback from faculty and staff. And fortunately for us, we are given this opportunity to look at what happened and see how we can improve our process. And we will. I agree with President Gardino that Jason and his team performed admirably. There's no doubt about he was there within a minute or even 45 seconds, right? Perfect. As administrators, I think we need to be a little bit better in our deliberate communication, looking at our emergency management processes and ensuring that we lock those down. We have a responsibility to the students to ensure that we improve and that we evolve and mature those processes because, again, we are fortunate enough to be given this opportunity make it better.
And we have a lot of thinking to do here, because I mean, I'll give you the straight ahead answer. I don't know, sitting right here a week later, what I could do to prevent miscommunication. I can certainly do more communication and try and just combat it with volume of accurate communication, but to eliminate the miscommunication, my head's not, I don't have my finger on that solution. One thing that Jason and I have talked about is this started with not a social media miscommunication. This started with an overheard statement and misinterpreted statement that then, is more one-to-one, not really social media. And then that got into social media really after the 911 call came in. So we've got to think about how we even talk to each other. Do I walk up to you at your desk and talk to you when there might be someone sitting next to you at your desk that is misinterpreting what I say to you because we've got a context that they're not part of? So do we have to have, if you will, more safe spaces even to have a dialogue about something that's serious? I mean, if I say, what do you think about the baseball game yesterday? That's a different thing. But if I say, we've got a police report of a concerned issue, we may not be able to have those conversations that can be overheard. And that's because that's where this started. We've got to work out those issues as well. We have spaces that are in public. We have to find people that share an office. We've got to bring people out and to talk. And that's a lesson learned as well. That if I'm talking to Catherine, and she kind of knows where my head's at because we work together a lot, but Andreas just walks by my office and hears me say something, he might leave with a whole different impression than she and I have had. And that's kind of what triggered that. And then it went into the social media. So the miscommunication was not social. It was actually old school, old man kind of communication. And we've got to work on that as well. So and sadly, my PhD is in communication. I was a communication professor. So this is up my old alley, but I don't think anybody knows how to do what you just asked right today. I mean, if you look at national politics, we're talking about other countries taking over our social media environment and potentially influence our elections. So we've got a lot to learn as a society, and we'll do our best to do it as fast as we possibly can. One thing that I will insist on, and that I won't say the next time this happens, the next time this never happens, he's going to have Don or someone like Don at his side all the time. And I'm going to have 3 or 4 or 5 people in the command post, if you will, monitoring the social media activity and finding a way. I mean, I'll be honest, this is one of the frustrating things to me. When we were putting stuff out that was, I believe, accurate, looking back at it, it was what we knew at the time. We had people telling other people not to believe what we were saying because we were lying to save face. So we had active threads countering the credibility of our messages. And that's understandable. I'm not criticizing those folks. That's the world out there that when you open stuff up to anybody and everybody. Another thing we haven't talked about is I have a friend that lives in Burlington, Vermont, who was watching it live, because there was a student here whose brother is a reporter at the TV station, and they were using their telephone, and so it was being broadcast live, and he was telling me things. He was telling me where my cops were running because he was watching it on TV, and I was in the EOC. So we've got a lot of work to do to get a handle on that. You're absolutely. It's a great point.
Thank you, President Gaudino, and everyone who answered. We are a little over time, but I want to squeeze in a few more quick questions right before we go, and we'll get to that.
Hi, thank you for your time. I was in the circ at the time, and I'm also supposed to be in a knee brace, and so partially disabled. And I was told to just get out of the building, and so hobbling up in the cold snow, I was like a slow target, and so it was terrifying. And if I were on crutches like I was the week before, it would just be a different story. And people that are on crutches. There are a lot of them on this campus, and people with more disabilities. So is there like a protocol or something that you guys would do if there is someone with like, you know, more intense disability for that kind of situation?
I'm going to say no. These need to be this run, this run, hide, fight, and fight is like way down the list, right? That's when the person's knocking on your door or walked into your room. But the run, hide, those have to be, to some extent, more individualistic decisions. So if you can't run, you might hide, where the two people, the two track members that are sitting next to you are going to run right away because they're going to get out of here at lickety-split, right? So, and I'd be with you, by the way, because I don't have any ailments, but I'm a couple of months from my 70th birthday and I have football knees, so I can't run either, right? So I'd be worried about running out to my safety. I might find that place to hide. So we need to train in two ways. We need to train the protocol, but then kind of like I've been saying with respect to the weather, and I hesitate to mention that W word again, there has to be a lot of individual choices being made based on your condition. I mean, your condition, the situation that you find yourself in, and your confidence in yourself. And so that's the answer I think. The other kind of factor, and of course this requires lots of rational thought, and I've been in crisis situations and the brain isn't always completely rational, right? So the Black Hall and the Cirque, in my mind, were kind of a gray area because Lynn's right there. So I would have felt completely comfortable sending you out of L&L or the psych building, to head up to your residence hall or wherever you're going, because that's a long way away from any thought of action. This is 2 buildings away. So for you, I might have said, bunker down, don't run. So there's going to be a lot of individual. I don't know that there's one answer that's going to fit every single person and situation.
Moving to the next question.
So I just wanted to clarify. Earlier you said that you weren't sure of what statement to make to the students. Is that correct? When the initial alert was sent out.
After the initial alert was sent out, and we began getting a sense that the situation was less risky than we thought. This was, let's say, within the first 10 or 15 minutes after the 911 call. When I was listening to the chatter and I was hearing no known shooter, no shots fired, no one injured, no one screaming, I began to think in my command post, this is not the active shooter that we thought it was. This may be a spoof. I would now like to tell students outside of that area that their threat threshold in my mind has lessened, and maybe now you flee. But I didn't have the ability of segmenting by building or class, and I didn't have a ready message in my head, and then about the time I was casting that message, shot fired in the Cirque. Ooh, glad I didn't send the message. Then nothing was going on in the Cirque, and I was just getting ready to think about a message, shots fired in L&L. And so it was a 2-hour event that was 4 20-minute events or so. And that's what I meant by I didn't know what to say.
Right. Okay. So from the time that KitCom was alerted at 5:25, our official alert got sent out at 5:35. That's 10 minutes. You say, oh, well, we have to formulate something to say to send out. But in the official statement, it says that the CWU police were aware of an upset student who was making threatening statements at 4:13. And tonight it was confirmed that that statement involved shooting. So why was it that we didn't have a contingency plan, that we didn't have something already formulated in the case that this was serious?
We did. No, we do have those pre-formulations. I think what Jason was trying to say, and this is going to alarm and confuse, but it's not a once-in-a-lifetime thing that a student says something that is potential, or a person not just a student, a person, a member of our community, a member of our staff, says something that could be interpreted as threatening. Trust me, if I showed you my emails, since I elected not to close classes the last few days, I would be buried in a bunker right now if I believed every potential threat. These things happen because we're a heightened awareness of a society, correctly so, about the threat of violence. So he has protocols, Jason has protocols to determine the level of the threat. They were thinking that is serious enough to alert the individual to whom that threat was targeted to, but not an active shooter running through buildings at that point. The miscommunication that took place there moved it to other people saying active shooter, which went on in 9/11. I'm going to bet that when Jason, and I'll ask him to comment, he may be wrong, when Jason was responding to Lind, he did not in any way associate the shooter in Lind with the situation that he was talking about in Bullion. So completely in our minds, unrelated events, totally unrelated events. And they were unrelated events. It's the people's interpretation of an overheard conversation that related them, that created the 911 call, and we were responding to, we thought, which Jason was responding, to a complete unique. I was aware of that person who had made those potentially threatening comments against an individual. I was sitting in the EOC and drew no connection between those two, because I had known by that time that threat had been de-escalated down to just be aware individual that this person had made a comment about you, not as an active shooter. So different things, and that's where a lot of I think the confusion is still existing, thinking that's one stream that he was aware of. That's one stream, that's one timeline, but two completely different law enforcement threads. Am I making sense there? Why wouldn't I put what in the official announcement? I didn't understand the question. I just didn't hear all the question.
In the official announcement that the news printed that you released, it said that the CWU police had investigated at 413, had been aware of this. Why was that included? If it wasn't something that directly related to the incident of the false alarm shooting, why include it?
Well, this is a difficult, I'm struggling with the way to say this that's understandable. It was connected to the 911 call because it prompted the 911 call. And we wanted people to understand, otherwise why did this 911 call just appear out of air? Well, it didn't just appear out of air, it appeared with a legitimate concern of a person who had overheard this other conversation. So it is part of the report that we are doing in investigating how that transmitted, but we were not responding to the potential threat that was in Bullion. We were responding to a brand new threat that we had no idea at that moment was connected. It wasn't until, I guess, 24 hours after the issue was quote unquote resolved that we figured out that connection. And that's why we're telling people we think that happened. That's an important lesson learned in our opinion, learned as well, of how quickly a statement that we take, I don't want to say innocuous, that we take as a low threshold, can manifest itself into what we all experienced. So that's why we reported it. We want everybody to know that we know that this is how it came to be from this conversation, this private conversation over here, where I say to Catherine, we overheard something downtown that someone's pretty mad at you, and and we think maybe that person is stressed, is in distress, and there could be some violence on you. Lock your door. That's all we said. Just lock your door, so you're not just sitting out in your front office, right? That's all. And then boom, a few minutes later, there's an active shooter 911 call. We had no idea those two things were connected until we started tracing the actual texts and phone calls. And that's why we released the timeline. That make sense?
Thank you, everyone. Just want to say thank you all for coming out tonight and asking those amazing questions. We will work to collect all those questions that didn't get asked and hopefully get you some answers. We want to thank Provost Frank, President Gaudino, Andreas, and our Chief of Police, Jason, for being here, and of course, our CWU Police for keeping us safe. The conversation doesn't end here. We'll continue as needed, and please all get home safely, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow. So, good night.